In today's episode, we're going to show you how to have a great experience awarding experience points for non-combat encounters.
Greetings, Dungeon Masters. I'm Monty Martin.
And I'm Kelly McLaughlin.
And we are the Dungeon Dudes.
On today's episode, we're going to take a look at different ways that you can give experience points to your players for things other than combat.
Yeah, a lot of Dungeon Masters use the experience point system and fixate only on awarding XP whenever players fight in combat, and for very little else. Otherwise, Dungeon Masters decide that XP are good for nothing, and I'm just going to dispense with them entirely and use a milestone system or an alternate way of advancement that I really think takes out a really cool tool that DMs have to use in the form of experience points.
Yeah, one of the great things about experience points is it gives the player something that they get to gain aside from treasure, magic items, and things like that. Whenever they complete a task, they get experience points that makes them feel like they're gaining power in the game.
Even though they're really not, it's kind of a psychological effect, and it works in any time you've played a video game or that's an RPG. You feel good about gaining experience points, even though you haven't quite gotten to the end goal, but you feel like you've made some progress.
Yeah, every time that bar fills up a bit more, I feel accomplished. Like I'm working towards a goal, I'm going to accomplish something.
And I think that that's one of the most important tools that Dungeon Masters have at their disposal when using XP, because you can award XP for almost everything. And it's a great way to signal to your players, hey, good job. It's not really going to affect your game aside from the players leveling up a little bit faster, and it's much easier to control the pace by making the rewards larger or smaller depending on what the players have accomplished. So we're going to dive in and talk about what some of these other non-combat things are that you can award XP for, how much XP you might want to give for these sorts of things, so that you've got this really useful tool in your DM toolkit.
So Monty, how much XP should we be awarding our characters for non-combat encounters?
Well, in my opinion, you should give players XP for non-combat encounters based on the challenge rating of the monsters that they're fighting already. So if you have a party of 5th level characters and you want to give them XP for a non-combat thing, look at how much XP a 5th level monster is worth. Which, for reference, I think is like 1,800 XP. So I would divide that up by 4 for 4 players, and that's 450 XP. So I like to say that I'll give the players 450 experience points for a big thing that's a non-combat event, and then I would give them half that for something that's like a smaller reward, and maybe even 1/4 that for little tiny things, right? So that way I find that I can give out players like 2 really big non-combat rewards per level, or like I'll give out 1 big non-combat reward every game session, and then I'm okay to give out like 4 little things every game session, and knowing that I'm not going to run over XP because most of the time they're getting like 125 XP per non-combat thing.
I think this is a really important thing because in general, I know a lot of players that I've DM'd for, or a lot of games that I've played in, there is a certain joy about being able to get through an encounter without having to fight.
Yeah, and also players like to do a lot of different things outside the game, whether that's role-playing or investigation or otherwise. And being able to know that, hey, you can kick them a couple XP to make them recognize, oh yeah, you did a good job with this. Some DMs will even like to write down like what it was that they did on a little card and hand that to the PCs. But yeah, if you're a 5th level character and the DM's like, hey, good job on that role-playing, have an extra 100 XP, you're going to be like, cool. And that'll be in your head as a player that, oh yeah, I got XP for role-playing really, really well.
It'll make you want to do that more.
And it'll make you want to do that more often, right?
Yeah.
And especially if you're rewarding XP for a lot of different things, but in little packets, your players are going to want to do lots of different things rather than trying to be like, oh, well, I want to gain level 6, so I'm going to go out to the farmlands and slay 200 goblins until I level up, which is not what you want to encourage.
Discovering a hidden location or magic item.
Yeah, this is one of the things that I like to make often a big reward, like the full XP value. Generally, I always have like a hidden room somewhere in my dungeons that requires what I consider to be like an extra level of thinking to find it. I usually don't try to make it like super obscure, but then when my players find it, I'm like, you found that secret room. Here's the XP for doing it. And they feel rewarded because they paid attention to the details of the area and they found that thing. I also, I don't give out magic items too often in my campaigns anymore. So I usually find that giving out a magic item, because that's a reward that only goes to one person, I like to give out XP to everybody so that everyone gets to share in that accomplishment.
That's awesome.
The next thing that you can consider giving XP out for are the more difficult wilderness encounters, like when the party has to cross a dangerous desert or weather a storm on a ship or deal with a blizzard or explore a haunted forest. Right?
All terrible things that can really wreak havoc on a party. So yeah, you want to feel rewarded for being able to accomplish that.
Now, usually I'll require those scenarios to have the party succeed on a couple skill-based rolls, or they might need to prepare for something. So I'll usually write that down in really, really wide terms, but just say that, like, getting across this dangerous thing, climbing that cliff, getting across the volcano, that's worth XP because your players have to figure out a way to get past that.
We also have things in dungeons other than creatures, like traps.
Exactly. Now, traps are one of these big things that got hugely expanded in Xanathar's Guide to Everything, but there were no recommendations for how to award XP for them. For little traps that don't do much, like that are just like, here's a poison trap as part of opening that box, I usually don't find that it's worth doing XP for that. But like Xanathar's Guide to Everything has that one example of the boulder trap that runs down the hallway.
Yes.
I would totally give full XP for that trap, right? Like that is almost a combat encounter in the scale of what it takes.
Now I know that Xanathar's Guide kind of breaks it down into, there's those really elaborate traps. There are some traps that kind of fall in between, like just a poison needle or a big hallway.
Yeah.
Would you do like half XP for some of those smaller but still elaborate traps?
Yeah, and that's where like you want to gauge like how big the trap is and what it's worth, and then split that up accordingly.
Yeah. Another thing that you might run into in your dungeon is puzzles or finding clues to get further in the campaign.
Yeah, a lot of campaigns involve some sort of mystery or investigation, and dungeons often involve puzzles. Some of these puzzles can be really, really complex, and often might have many clues involved in them. So I actually like giving the party XP when they successfully find a clue or identify one, just as an extra way of telling them, hey, you did a good job finding this clue, and it also reminds them that it's an important clue. Usually once they solve the puzzle or the mystery, then they get a big packet of XP at the end.
So are the clues like half XP or quarter XP?
Yeah, so like I would usually make the clues quarter XP things. So it's like if you find the blood stain on the floor and the murder weapon, right? And sometimes for some clues and puzzles, you can actually think of them as components of one thing. So you might say, okay, well the whole clue, the whole puzzle and investigation has 4 clues. The party's going to find the 4 clues, and then once they have all 4 clues, once they figured out what they mean, then they get XP. So actually just solving the mystery is better than 2 full combat encounters.
What about conversations that you have with either villains or NPCs, patrons that can further the plot of the campaign?
Why shouldn't those be worth XP?
Exactly. I love
Right?
conversation moments. Like
Yeah.
actually, some of my favorite parts are when you and me get into character and start arguing at the table.
The important thing, though, is that I think that those need to be the moments, the ones that you award XP for, especially a lot of XP, there needs to be a tension or a conflict to that conversation, right? Like you're negotiating with the noble over your reward for the quest, or you're trying to convince the villain to spare somebody's life. Right?
And if you can successfully do that against the odds.
Yes. Yeah. Right? This is also something where you want to be careful how often you use these, because sometimes the bard might take them over completely. Right? And that's where you want to find opportunities in these engagements to make sure that all the party members are involved in that, because you're going to give XP to all of them equally for it. So allow the wizard to use their historical knowledge in some way, or the druid to use their nature knowledge to kind of augment the bard's argument.
You're storming a castle or a stronghold, and you need to break into it, and the party successfully manages to do this.
Or they manage to get out.
Or they manage to get out.
Yeah. I think this goes into the whole line of things of, like, sometimes the party, you have the gate guardian in front of the dungeon, and it's like you're planning this really awesome Iron Golem fight, and then your party's like, well, actually, we want to check out these fissures over here, and we're going to use our spells and equipment to blow our own hole in the dungeon. If they do a lot of creative work for that, then I think it's worth giving out XP. If your party just sees, oh, there's a golem, but I'm going to use Pass Wall, maybe not. Like, if they just use one spell or ability to get past it, I don't think I would give a full XP reward for that.
What if it was a spell that you yourself hadn't even considered as a possibility?
Then I think I would. Again, things that I, like, when it comes to the party bypassing an encounter, I like to say, like, did this take more than one party member to accomplish? If it did, it's probably worth giving XP for.
So you face a deadly monster that could probably kill a party member or even the whole party, and the party finds a way to forgo that or get around that or incapacitate the creature.
So I think one of the classic tropes of this is the low-level party, like the 5th level party that has to fight the Tarrasque or an ancient dragon.
That
right?
sounds terrible.
It sounds terrible, but, like, think of all those examples in, like, books and movies and video games where the heroes had to fight a gigantic, like, Godzilla-esque creature that there was no chance for them to actually kill that monster, but they did something to, like, trick it to go away, or they trapped it, or even, like, they just successfully rescued everybody that it was threatening. That's the case where, like, the players won, but the Tarrasque is worth thousands of experience points, and you don't want to give thousands of XP to your low-level party. So the balance is give them XP as if they beat a monster of their level. That's actually a case where I might give double XP. Then that, like, that feels like a big accomplishment.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they didn't kill the monster, and it's still out there. At the end of the campaign, you might have the finale where they do kill it or trap it or something like that. Then you give them the full XP.
So another great thing that we saw in Xanathar's Guide to Everything is an expanded idea of downtime activities.
And I don't understand why these don't give you XP.
I love downtime activities. I love spending that kind of role-playing time doing these really cool things that can really improve your character or improve your role-playing or just... I don't know, they're all so neat.
Yeah, I think a lot of people see those downtime activities and they're like, they're really, really cool, but, like, what's the incentive on the part of a player to do them? And the charts the charts really try to give players, like, an incentive because, like, you might have a chance to find a magic item or make a new contact or something like that. Give XP.
Yeah.
Right? It's totally worth it. Especially for... one of the things that I love doing, and I did this in our campaign, was I gave you guys XP for carousing and going out on the town based on how much money you spent, right? And that's actually a callback to prior editions of D&D, where you actually got XP not based on the value of the monster, on how much treasure you pulled out of the dungeon. You gained 1 XP for every gold piece that you found. I don't think that that's necessarily that's a cool thing that you could do in some campaigns, but just the idea of, like, the party going out carousing, spending a bunch of money, or, like, the wizard going out and researching new spells, or the cleric going out and performing community service hours, or the rogue just engaging in some light crime and larceny. All those things can be glossed over. You don't need to have combat happen in those things, but you should totally give XP for them. And because each party member is going to do something, it's a great role-playing opportunity where everyone gets to, like, have the spotlight shone on them, because you can go around the table and the players can say what they did during their downtime, role-play it out a little bit, and then you can give XP for that. And that's one thing as well where you can actually, if you want to have a little bit of a competition, you can have the other players role play the other NPCs that the player engages in during the downtime.
That makes it interesting.
Yeah.
We should also be awarding XP for accomplishing major moments in the adventure.
Yeah, and this is kind of the catch-all for everything that we didn't talk about before, right? Like, I think it's really important in a campaign, as a DM, to be able to say in one sentence to your players, or for your players to be able to say, what are our objectives? What are the things that we want to do? So much so that we've actually started writing these down as a document at our table so that everyone has that as a point of reference and we can cross them off. And you know what? It completely feels like a quest log from a video game.
Yeah.
But it works.
It does work.
It works really, really well. Especially if you give out the players more than one quest at a time. And then they kind of get to pick and choose what they want to do. And you get that open-ended sort of adventure. And I will say, like, this is one where you can stack them up on top of each other. So if the quest involves finding clues, solving a mystery, and retrieving a magic item, I would give the XP for finding the clues, solving the puzzle, retrieving the magic item, and then the bonus XP on top of all of that is that you did all three.
Now, is that a major or a minor?
That would be a major thing. I often also categorize my quests into like major quests and minor quests. And I usually like to think about the players being able to accomplish 1 or 2 quests per character level. And I really, really think it's a good idea to like make small quests that the players can complete in a single game session. It really makes everyone feel like they've accomplished something. Nothing is worse than coming to a game of D&D, having a really good time, but then walking away and being like, did we actually accomplish anything? Role-playing scenes between the player characters.
Yes.
This is one of the hardest things to get a group of players to do sometimes, but it's totally one where you should award XP. If you as the DM have sat back, you're like doing the relaxing thing, and your players are having an argument, or they're talking about their plans.
In character.
Or they're talking about, an out-of-character argument, no way. But if their characters are having an argument where they can't decide, like, should we go after the Hobgoblin Warlord, or do we need to cut the dragon off at the pass? And their characters all have individual reasons for that, and they're role-playing that, and you're not saying a word. Or your characters are just like, we're hanging out at the bar and having drinks, and we start playing a game. You should give them the full XP reward and hug them, because you have great players.
Yeah.
And I think that it should be a goal to have that encounter. I think for a lot of new groups, some groups will just immediately start doing this because they're already friends, and other groups have a real hard time doing the interplayer role-playing. But when it happens, you should give them XP for it.
Yeah, as a DM, nothing makes me happier than leaning back and realizing that I've just set a scene up that caused everybody at the table to just start doing their own thing while I just sat back and went, neat. Mm-hmm. You guys go for it.
Yeah, and now I will say, to kind of wrap up, all of these things are fun, and they are all their own reward, and they're things, though, that I find when they don't get rewarded, players forget to do them, and DMs forget that they're a thing in the game that's worth paying attention to. So awarding XP is one of those things that's just kind of like going over things with a highlighter and saying, hey, this was an important moment. But you can't really do that with the milestone system for downtime.
Yeah. If we spend an entire game in downtime and realize that if we had just not done that session at all, we still would have accomplished the same leveling system, doesn't feel as good.
Yeah, and it makes the players feel okay about spending time doing downtime because they don't feel like they've lost out on advancing the story or advancing the quest. Oftentimes, I think that the milestone system tends to like push the players only to do things that are relevant to the quest. And while that can be really, really handy sometimes, I find that it makes the world feel a little less diverse sometimes. Using experience points and awarding them for things other than combat is a great way to enhance role-playing at your table and make your players feel really excited about trying new and creative solutions instead of just that old hack-and-slash gameplay. Of course, We talked about many different options that you can use in your game, but a lot of those were based on some of the things that inspired us from Xanathar's Guide to Everything, such as the downtime rules, traps rules, and rules for using tools and navigation. You can find out our full review of the DM Toolkit in Xanathar's Guide to Everything by following the link right here.
Or if you're looking for some spells to really enhance the villain in your campaign, we have a video on that over here.
You can pick up your own copy of Xanathar's Guide to Everything by following the link below.
Subscribe to our channel so you never miss an episode.
Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time
in the dungeon.